8 Great Sufferings of Human Life. In Buddhist philosophy, human life is described as a journey through many sufferings. From birth to death, humans cannot avoid these sufferings. The Buddha pointed out 8 great sufferings that everyone has to face to help us gain a deeper understanding of the nature of life and thereby find ways to overcome them. Here is a more detailed explanation of the 8 sufferings according to the Buddha's teachings. 1. Suffering of birth. The suffering of birth, or the suffering of birth, begins when a human being is still a fetus in the mother's womb. During this stage, even though it is only a small form, the fetus has to face many difficulties. It is a narrow, dark, and dirty space in the womb, where the development of the fetus depends entirely on the nutrition provided by the mother. Every change in the mother's diet or mood directly affects the fetus, causing it to experience unpleasant and uncomfortable feelings. When born, the child must face a new and strange world, and the first cry is a natural reaction to the discomfort and suffering of a new life. According to Buddhism, prenatal education, that is, educating and caring for the fetus spiritually, is extremely important. Even when still a fetus, humans have consciousness, that is, awareness and perception of the surrounding environment. Because of consciousness, the fetus has certain movements and emotions. The fetus's perception is also gradually developing and perfecting over time, but it is also deeply affected by the mother's mood and emotions. Therefore, the suffering of birth is not only the suffering of the child when he is born, but also a process of suffering that lasts from the time he is in the mother's womb. 2. Suffering of illness. When carrying a human body, people cannot avoid suffering related to illness. Suffering of illness is one of the most painful sufferings, when the body and mind are both tormented by diseases, from small injuries such as cuts, bleeding to serious diseases such as cancer or incurable diseases. The pain caused by illness is not only limited to the body, but also deeply affects the spirit, making people feel tired, depressed, and even desperate. Not only that, the treatment of illness also brings financial and psychological burdens. The cost of medicine, hospital fees, and health concerns make people feel miserable, not only physically but also mentally. Illness not only makes people miserable, but also causes consequences for relatives, making them worry and tired in taking care of the sick. This is especially true for young children. When they pass the golden period after 1 year old, they begin to encounter frequent illnesses such as fever, flu, causing the whole family to face anxiety and fatigue. 3. Suffering from old age. Suffering from old age is the suffering of old age, when people cannot resist the impermanent law of nature. In their youth, people can be healthy, active, and full of vitality. But when old age comes, everything gradually changes. The body is no longer as healthy as before. Eyes are dim, ears are deaf, limbs become slow, skin is wrinkled, back is tired, eating is no longer delicious, sleep is no longer deep, and memory declines. Signs of old age appear one after another, making people feel helpless before the ravages of time. Aging is one of the most painful sufferings in life, when people have to face the weakness of the body and mind, no longer able to satisfy their own needs and desires. Declining health and spirit make people feel insecure and worried about the future, not knowing what difficulties they will face in old age. 4. Suffering of death. Suffering of death is the suffering of death, when people have to face the end of their life. Although everyone wants to live smoothly, die peacefully, that is, to live a peaceful life and leave peacefully, few people can achieve this. Before dying, people often have to go through a period of illness and pain when the body is weak and the mind is insecure. The fear of death, difficulty breathing, feelings of anxiety and insecurity make people feel more miserable than ever. Not only that, suffering of death is also related to regrets and worries about life. Before dying, people often regret what they have not done, about wealth, property, about loved ones who have not been cared for properly. Anxiety about the future of family, children, and unfinished business makes people feel insecure and miserable in their final moments. This not only causes suffering for the dying person, but also makes the living relatives feel heartbroken, regretful, and unable to forget. 5. The suffering of separation. The suffering of separation is the pain of having to part with the person you love. This suffering can come from separation due to death, to biet, or separation in life, sin lai. The suffering of separation is one of the most profound sufferings when people have to face loss and loneliness when their loved ones are no longer by their side. During war, the suffering of separation is most clearly shown. When families are separated, parents are separated from their children. Husbands and wives are separated, making life full of anxiety and suffering. People who love each other but cannot be together for reasons beyond their control also feel pain and suffering, forcing them to express their feelings through poetry, music, and painting to somehow relieve their pain. 6. Suffering from not getting what they want. Suffering from not getting what they want is the suffering of not being able to satisfy one's own desires and desires. People always have desires, needs, and desires in life, from small things like wanting a new shirt, a nice house, to big dreams like success and happiness. However, these desires are not always fulfilled. When they cannot achieve what they want, people feel pain, disappointment, and depression. For example, a person may feel pain when seeing others having things that they cannot have, such as an expensive shirt, a luxurious house, or a successful job. Jealousy and the feeling of helplessness before one's own limitations make people feel miserable and sad. 7. Oan tang hoi ko. Oan tang hoi ko is the suffering of having to face people you hate. In life, we cannot always live in harmony with everyone. There are relationships that cause hatred, stress, and frustration. When having to regularly meet and interact with people you do not like, people feel uncomfortable, angry, and miserable. This suffering also appears in the family, when there are conflicts and disputes between siblings, parents, and children. Jealousy, envy, and fighting for rights in the family make everyone feel sad and miserable. These negative emotions not only make others miserable, but also make the hater feel miserable and unhappy. 8. Suffering of the 5 aggregates. The suffering of the 5 aggregates is the suffering that comes from clinging to and egoizing the 5 aggregates. According to Buddhism, the 5 aggregates are the 5 elements that make up a human being: form, body; feeling, perception, action, and consciousness. Clinging to these 5 aggregates makes people feel suffering when they change and disintegrate. As long as we have this body, we have to endure the suffering that they bring. This body always tries to satisfy its needs and desires, from which suffering arises. The mind is sad, angry, worried, hurt, and has 100 troubles. This 8th thing covers all 7 sufferings above. The body is related to birth, aging, sickness, and death. The mind is sad, angry, worried, hurt, and has 100 troubles. The 5 aggregates of suffering are the combination of all other sufferings, when people cling to the ego, unable to let go and be liberated. The 8 sufferings, according to the Buddha's teachings, are not simply abstract concepts, but they also represent a deep understanding of the nature of suffering in human life. Every suffering, from birth to death, is an experience that anyone must face in their journey of existence. These sufferings are not something we can avoid, but are natural challenges that people must overcome to reach understanding and maturity in their souls. Recognizing and understanding these 8 sufferings is the first step on the path to liberation. When we are aware of the origin of these sufferings, we will be able to learn to face them mindfully and calmly. Instead of trying to avoid or deny them, we can let go of our attachments, accept that suffering is a part of life, and from there seek peace and happiness in our souls. These sufferings are part of the natural law, and we cannot change them, but we can change the way we face them. Only when we truly understand and accept the impermanent nature of life can we find the way to overcome suffering and reach true happiness. This is also the message that the Buddha wanted to convey. Happiness does not lie in avoiding suffering, but in knowing how to overcome it wisely and compassionately.